Today, we explore Karens that died in the worst ways possible, from a reckless, self-righteous Karen who stormed onto an active stunt set, to a status-obsessed Karen who pushed onto an active airport ramp unaware of the danger that awaited her. It was June 7, 2014, in Portland, Oregon. The Saturday farmers market stretched across several downtown blocks, drawing steady mid-morning crowds between 8 and 2. Brenda Holloway, 36, was a Portland real estate agent known among colleagues for being assertive and meticulous in negotiations. Friends later described her as persistent in conflicts once she believed she had been treated unfairly. A week earlier, she had purchased a jar of raw honey from the beekeeper and became convinced it had been diluted. She called him twice, demanding an explanation. He told her raw honey can crystallize or vary in texture depending on temperature and floral source. Brenda felt dismissed. That morning, she decided to confront him publicly and demand a refund and apology in person. She arrived around 10:15 a.m. and approached the booth immediately, raising her voice before the beekeeper could finish greeting her. Nearby, customers turned as she loudly accused him of selling inferior products and misleading buyers. The beekeeper responded calmly, again offering a refund. Brenda refused to lower her voice and insisted she would not accept being dismissed as a customer. She demanded an apology and threatened to report him to market organizers. The beekeeper's display included 2 tables of products and positioned several feet behind the main customer area, a sealed observation hive used for demonstrations. The hive was enclosed in a wooden frame with clear panels, ventilated through screened sections, and secured with screws and 2 exterior latches. A printed sign at eye level read, "Do not touch, live bees." The unit sat on a small wheeled cart with locked wheels. As the exchange intensified, the beekeeper stepped back behind his table to create distance. Brenda followed, saying she had every right to stand wherever she wanted since she had paid for his product. In doing so, she crossed the customer boundary and backed into the cart holding the observation hive. The impact shifted the cart. One wheel rolled slightly off the uneven pavement edge, causing the hive to tilt and strike the ground on one corner. The fall split the wooden corner joint, snapping one latch and creating a visible opening along the panel edge. The vibration agitated the bees inside. Within seconds, several guard bees exited through the opening. Brenda, standing closest to the hive, was stung on the neck and forearms. As she swatted and turned, more stings followed near her hairline and jaw. She stumbled backward, tripped over a folding chair, and fell. The beekeeper immediately covered the hive with a thick canvas cloth to reduce light and limit further escape, while bystanders moved away. Within a minute, Brenda showed signs of a severe allergic reaction. Paramedics later learned she had a documented bee sting allergy, but she was not carrying an epinephrine auto-injector that morning. Emergency services were called. Paramedics arrived within minutes, pushing through the crowded walkway. Brenda was struggling to breathe and showing signs of dangerously low blood pressure. Intramuscular epinephrine was administered, and she was transported to a nearby hospital. Shortly after arrival, she went into cardiac arrest due to delayed epinephrine. Despite resuscitation efforts, she was pronounced dead later that morning. The medical examiner ruled the cause of death as anaphylaxis triggered by multiple bee stings. The market closed for the remainder of the day. No criminal charges were filed. In the following season, organizers updated spacing requirements and required physical barriers for vendors displaying live insects or animals. It was September 9, 2017, in Phoenix, Arizona, and the afternoon heat had climbed to 106 degrees. The desert air shimmered above the concrete, and waves of heat rose visibly from the tarmac beyond the terminal windows. Susan Cho was 47 years old and worked as a regional sales director for a logistics company based in the city. Her role required frequent travel, and colleagues described her as highly detail-oriented and quick to challenge policies she believed were inefficient. She flew often and was accustomed to navigating airline procedures herself. When her checked suitcase failed to appear at baggage claim, her irritation escalated almost immediately. She stated loudly that she had watched the bag being loaded and criticized the staff's handling of the situation as unacceptable. Within minutes, she demanded a supervisor, repeating that she traveled constantly and believed she understood how airline systems worked. She began recording the staff on her phone, continuing to film the interaction. The airport's largest terminal handled the majority of daily traffic, Access doors leading from the concourse to the ramp were clearly marked for authorized personnel only and fitted with local alarm systems tied to security monitoring. Staff informed Susan that her bag had been misrouted and would arrive on the next inbound flight later that afternoon. They offered complimentary delivery to her home. She rejected the explanation, stating that she did not believe them. Convinced the airline was lying to her, she said she would go look for it herself and abruptly walked toward a marked service door reading, "Authorized personnel only. Alarm will sound." Without hesitation, she pushed through the bar. The alarm activated immediately, triggering both a local siren and an automatic notification to airport security dispatch. Although the door had experienced intermittent wiring faults earlier in the week, the alert was transmitted in real time, and a response unit was dispatched within seconds. Susan descended the exterior metal staircase and stepped onto the active ramp. The heat radiating from the pavement was intense, and the noise level was high. Jet engines idled in the distance. Several crew members noticed her immediately, radioed the breach to operations, and began shouting and signaling forcefully for her to stop and return to the building. Instead of stopping, she waved them off and continued forward, holding her phone out as if recording the scene. At the same time, a regional jet had just begun taxiing from a gate at approximately 10 miles per hour, following the painted taxi center line. The cockpit crew observed a person entering the taxi path and immediately applied maximum braking. Although the aircraft was moving slowly, she entered the taxi path at close range, leaving insufficient stopping distance even after maximum braking was applied. Then the nose landing gear struck her. Emergency responders arrived within minutes and secured the area. She was transported to a local trauma center with severe lower body trauma, pelvic fractures, and significant internal bleeding. She underwent emergency surgery, but developed complications from traumatic shock and massive blood loss. Despite intensive care, she died 2 days later. The affected taxi lane and adjacent ramp area were closed for several hours pending investigation. This prompted a comprehensive review of ramp access procedures. The airport later reviewed its access protocols and reinforced staffing procedures at service doors during peak hours, emphasizing rapid physical response to any future unauthorized ramp entry. It was October 3, 2015, in Albuquerque, New Mexico. A permitted film crew had locked down part of a warehouse district to shoot a car rollover stunt. Off-duty police controlled traffic, and a clearly marked hot zone was set inside barricades and cones. Tammy Atkins, 31, was a substitute teacher in Albuquerque. A week of film-related road closures had forced long detours, making her late to 2 assignments and costing her a day's pay. She complained online that the production was treating the city as if it had priority over residents, and argued that the closures had not been properly communicated. Known among friends for confronting businesses over perceived rule violations, she convinced herself the production lacked proper authority. That afternoon, determined to expose what she believed was an unauthorized shutdown, she drove to the site with her phone ready to record. Orange water-filled barriers, traffic cones, and road closure signs marked the restricted block. The stunt corridor extended about 120 feet, with a coned safety buffer for the rollover arc. After 2 reduced-speed rehearsal passes, the coordinator initiated full lockup, halting all pedestrian and vehicle movement before the full-speed attempt. Around 2 p.m., Tammy approached a production assistant and demanded to know why she was being prevented from using the public street. As he began explaining the permitted closure, she interrupted and insisted on speaking with a supervisor. She began filming, stating loudly that taxpayer money was being wasted. An off-duty officer instructed her to remain behind the barricades. Tammy replied that she knew her rights and argued she could stand on any public sidewalk she chose. As final preparations began, the first assistant director initiated the final lockup procedure. Production assistants radioed in that traffic was halted at each control point. The stunt coordinator conducted a deliberate walkthrough of the vehicle path and the extended safety buffer. At that moment, the zone was visibly clear. Tammy stood outside the cones near the sidewalk, still recording. After the sweep, the coordinator returned to position and signaled that the set was secure. The stunt driver began the approach at the committed speed. As attention shifted downrange toward the oncoming vehicle, Tammy moved along the outer barricade line to improve her angle. Earlier in the afternoon, the temporary opening had been secured with interlocked steel barricades and weighted bases. However, Tammy slipped past during a brief moment when a PA was repositioning to confirm lockup at another post. Believing she was still outside the primary vehicle path, Tammy moved past the lighter barricade section and stepped just inside the clearly marked safety buffer, raising her phone higher. She crossed the boundary moments before the vehicle reached the ramp. According to investigators, the driver had already committed to the approach speed, making sudden braking unsafe. The driver hit the ramp at the designated speed and triggered the engineered rollover system. The vehicle flipped along its tested arc. As it rotated, the vehicle's rollover arc extended to the outer edge of the established safety buffer, where Tammy had positioned herself. She was struck and thrown to the pavement as the vehicle completed its roll and came to rest on its side several yards away. Crew members and the on-set medic reached her within seconds. Filming stopped immediately, and emergency procedures were initiated. She was unresponsive with severe head trauma and multiple fractures. She was transported by the staged ambulance within minutes to a nearby hospital. Imaging revealed a catastrophic traumatic brain injury. Emergency surgery was performed that evening to relieve intracranial pressure. She did not regain consciousness and died 2 days later from complications related to the injury. Investigators later determined that the temporary barricade opening had not been continuously secured during the stunt, creating an unauthorized breach in the safety perimeter. The production company was cited for failing to maintain barrier integrity during high-risk operations. Civil litigation followed and production was suspended. It was July 18, 2015 in Waukegan, Illinois. Conditions on Lake Michigan were beginning to shift, with steady winds building across the open water and whitecaps forming farther offshore. Deborah Pruitt was 39 years old and lived in Waukegan, where she worked as a property manager for a residential apartment company. Colleagues described her as confident handling disputes with tenants and vendors, often preferring direct confrontation when she believed rules were being applied unfairly. She owned a 19-foot fiberglass motorboat that she kept at a slip in Waukegan Harbor and frequently described herself as an experienced boater. That morning, Deborah arrived at the marina with her younger sister, Michelle, and a neighbor, planning an afternoon on the lake. A small craft advisory scheduled for noon warned of 22 miles per hour winds, gusts up to 35, and waves between 4 and 6 feet, posted through harbor alerts and NOAA weather radio. A marina staff member mentioned the advisory as Deborah prepared to untie the lines and suggested postponing the trip. Deborah responded sharply, insisting she had far more boating experience than the staff member. She claimed advisories were exaggerated to reduce liability and accused the marina of trying to discourage them from launching. When he suggested they wear life jackets, she dismissed the advice and untied the lines despite the warning. They launched at 11:45 and headed north from the harbor. As winds increased sooner than forecast, conditions worsened and the boat struggled to maintain course in the growing chop, pitching heavily but not taking on water. At approximately 12:30, they decided to turn back toward shore. During the turn, the boat was exposed broadside to larger wave sets. For several minutes, waves struck the vessel from the starboard side. A larger wave struck at an angle while the boat still carried a slight list from the maneuver. The combined force rolled the vessel, and it capsized. All three were thrown into the water, where temperatures measured about 61 degrees Fahrenheit. None were wearing life jackets, and Deborah struggled to stay afloat. Michelle and the neighbor attempted to support her near the overturned hull as waves continued breaking against the capsized boat. A passing recreational vessel spotted the capsized boat at approximately 12:40 and radioed the Coast Guard. The reporting vessel remained nearby and attempted recovery, but was only able to safely pull 2 of the occupants aboard due to the wave height and instability near the overturned hull. The Coast Guard launched from the station at Waukegan Harbor and arrived on scene within approximately 20 minutes of the distress call. Rescue personnel first recovered Michelle and the neighbor from the water, both conscious but showing signs of hypothermia. Deborah Pruitt was not immediately visible. After several minutes of searching the area around the overturned hull, responders located her submerged a short distance away. She was brought aboard unresponsive. CPR was initiated immediately. Deborah was transported to shore, where paramedics continued resuscitation efforts for over 30 minutes without response. She was pronounced dead at 2:11 in the afternoon. The coroner listed the cause of death as drowning, with hypothermia as a contributing factor. The Coast Guard cited the absence of life jackets and later coordinated a public awareness campaign with marine safety agencies. After the incident, local marine authorities reinforced life jacket compliance requirements for recreational boaters. Safety patrols increased random checks, and citations were issued to operators and passengers found underway without properly accessible Coast Guard-approved personal flotation devices. It was February 11, 2018, in Columbus, Ohio, and the temperature had fallen to 14 degrees Fahrenheit overnight. A prolonged cold snap forced furnaces across the city to run almost continuously, placing extra strain on aging heating systems. Inside a modest single-story home on Millbrook Drive, the air felt warm but heavy, the windows closed tightly against the winter wind. Sharon Kimball, 61, had lived in the house for more than 2 decades and prided herself on handling maintenance without outside help. She had recently scaled back from full-time office work and spent most mornings at home. A gas furnace and water heater operated from a small utility room off the hallway, where a combination smoke and carbon monoxide detector had been installed 2 years earlier. During the week leading up to the incident, the detector alarmed multiple times. Each alert irritated her further, and she convinced herself the device was overly sensitive rather than signaling a real problem. After the third alarm sounded late on February 10th, she removed the unit from the wall, unplugged it, and placed it in a kitchen drawer before returning to bed. By mid-morning the next day, the furnace cycled repeatedly as outdoor temperatures remained low. A hairline crack inside the heat exchanger, later identified during inspection, allowed combustion gases to mix with the heated air circulating through the house. Without the detector active, carbon monoxide accumulated gradually. Sharon moved between the kitchen and living room, tidying paperwork and preparing coffee. Unaware that the gas was building to dangerous levels, she began to feel fatigued and slightly dizzy, symptoms that progressed slowly enough to seem like ordinary exhaustion. As the furnace continued running, her coordination worsened. She sat on the couch, leaning back as the room grew quiet except for the steady hum of the heating system. Around 9 a.m., her daughter called but received no answer. Inside the house, Sharon attempted to stand but lost balance, lowering herself back onto the cushions. The exposure intensified, reducing oxygen delivery to her brain. By late morning, she was no longer able to respond to phone calls or movement around her. When her daughter arrived shortly after 11 a.m. and entered with a spare key, she found the living room unusually still and Sharon unconscious on the couch. Emergency services were contacted immediately. Paramedics arrived within minutes and began oxygen therapy while ventilating the home. Hospital testing later revealed severely elevated carboxyhemoglobin levels, confirming prolonged carbon monoxide exposure. Despite aggressive treatment, the damage from oxygen deprivation proved irreversible. Sharon remained in critical condition for 2 days before dying on February 13th. Post-incident inspection confirmed the cracked heat exchanger as the source of the leak and verified that the earlier alarms had been responding to genuine low-level exposure. Local safety officials used the case during winter outreach campaigns to emphasize annual furnace inspections and the importance of keeping carbon monoxide detectors active, especially during extended cold weather when heating systems operate under constant strain. It was October 4th, 2016, in Estes Park, Colorado. The sky over a mountain park meadow was clear and cool in the late afternoon light. The aspen trees along the eastern meadows had turned a full yellow. Fall season was in full swing, drawing visitors who lined the meadow edges to witness the annual rut. Diane Kowalski was 52 years old and lived in Aurora, Colorado. She had driven to the park that afternoon with her adult son to see the elk. She worked as a homeowners association coordinator and, according to her son, was accustomed to being the one who set the rules rather than followed them. She had visited the park once before and told nearby visitors she understood elk behavior and believed the safety barriers were excessive. She carried a digital camera with a zoom lens, but felt the posted viewing distance did not allow for the photos she wanted. At the center of the meadow, a bull elk weighing approximately 720 pounds stood among several cows. The bull had been bugling for over an hour, asserting dominance over the herd. Rangers had posted bright orange signs at trailheads and meadow entrances reading, "Elk rutting season. Stay 75 feet from all wildlife. Bull elk are dangerous." Rope barriers marked the safe viewing boundary. A ranger was stationed at the north end of the meadow and had already redirected several visitors that evening. At 5:40 in the afternoon, Diane stepped over the rope barrier to get closer shots of the bull and the cows. Her son called after her and told her to come back. She waved him off and walked toward the herd with her camera raised, closing the distance to roughly 30 feet from the nearest cow. Several nearby visitors verbally warned her that she was too close, but she ignored their warnings. Diane paused briefly to take multiple photographs, repositioning slightly to improve her angle. The bull, which had been facing slightly away, turned and fixed on her movement. His head lowered, his antlers angled forward. Within seconds, his steady walk accelerated into a charge. Diane turned and ran, but she had covered less than 15 feet when the bull caught up to her. He struck her from behind with his chest and antlers, knocking her forcefully to the ground. The impact forced the air from her lungs. He stepped on her before pivoting back toward the herd. The entire encounter lasted less than 10 seconds. The ranger stationed nearby had already begun moving when he saw her cross the barrier, but he was too far away to intervene before the charge occurred. Bystanders backed away as he reached her and radioed for emergency response. Paramedics arrived at 6:04 p.m. Diane had sustained a puncture wound to her lower back, 2 fractured vertebrae, a collapsed lung, and significant blunt force trauma to her hip and leg. She was stabilized at the scene and airlifted to a medical center, where she underwent emergency surgery that evening. Despite intervention, she developed complications from internal bleeding and did not survive. She was pronounced dead the following morning, October 5th. After the incident, rangers reinforced existing wildlife distance messaging and reminded visitors that bull elk during rut season are territorial and can charge without prolonged warning. Thanks for watching. If you liked these stories, click here.